Welcome back. In our previous lecture, we explored how quantum principles are revolutionizing business systems. Today, we're going to delve into something equally fascinating, how organizations can think and evolve like a human brain. We're going to explore neural business architecture, a framework that's transforming how organizations learn, adapt, and grow. Imagine your organization as a living, thinking entity, not just a collection of departments and processes, but a neural network that learns, adapts, and evolves in real time. This isn't metaphorical, it's a practical reality that leading organizations are implementing right now. Let me share a remarkable story that illustrates this transformation. In early 2025, a mid-sized software company was struggling with project delivery times. Despite having talented teams and robust processes, they couldn't seem to improve their efficiency. Traditional process optimization had reached its limits. Then they implemented their first neural business system. Within 6 months, something extraordinary happened. The system began identifying patterns that nobody had noticed. It found that project delays weren't primarily caused by technical issues or resource constraints, as everyone had assumed. Instead, the system discovered subtle patterns in team communication, decision-making sequences, and even the timing of meetings that were creating cascading delays across projects. By adapting these patterns, the company reduced project delivery times by 47% while simultaneously improving quality metrics. But here's the most interesting part. The system didn't just solve the immediate problem. It continued learning and adapting, identifying new optimization opportunities that humans hadn't even considered. This brings us to our first key principle of neural business architecture: organizational consciousness. Traditional business systems operate on predefined rules and processes. Neural business systems, however, develop what we might call organizational consciousness, an ability to sense, learn, and adapt in real time. Think about how your own brain works. When you're learning a new skill, you don't just follow a set of fixed rules. Your brain constantly adjusts based on feedback, creates new neural pathways, and strengthens successful patterns while weakening unsuccessful ones. Let's look at another example that demonstrates this principle in action. A retail chain implemented a neural inventory management system in 2024. It noticed, for instance, that sales of certain product increased 2 days after specific types of social media posts gained traction. It identified correlations between weather patterns, local events, and product demand that weren't obvious to human analysts. But more importantly, it learned from these patterns and began adjusting inventory levels proactively, often before human managers even realized there would be a demand shift. This brings us to our second key principle: adaptive intelligence. Neural business systems don't just learn from past data. They develop the ability to predict and adapt to future scenarios. This is fundamentally different from traditional predictive analytics, which relies on historical patterns to forecast future trends. Consider how this works in practice. A financial services firm implemented a neural customer service system in late 2024. The system began by analyzing historical customer interaction data, but it quickly evolved beyond simple pattern recognition. It started identifying emotional patterns in customer communications, predicting potential issues before they escalated, and even suggesting proactive solutions that customer service representatives hadn't considered. Within months, the system had developed what we might call emotional intelligence. It could predict with 94% accuracy which customers were likely to become frustrated based on subtle patterns in their communication style, and it could recommend the most effective approach for each individual customer. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of neural business architecture is its ability to create what we call cognitive networks. These are interconnected systems of learning and adaptation that span entire organizations. Think of it like the way different regions of your brain work together to solve complex problems. Let me share a fascinating example of this in action. A manufacturing company implemented a neural business system across their entire operation in 2025. The system connected everything from supply chain management to customer service, from production scheduling to quality control. But it didn't just connect these functions, it created a cognitive network that could think across traditional departmental boundaries. The results were remarkable. The system began identifying optimization opportunities that crossed traditional functional boundaries. It discovered, for instance, that slight adjustments to customer service scripts could reduce manufacturing waste by helping to better predict customer preferences. It found that changes in supplier payment terms could improve product quality by giving suppliers more flexibility in their own processes. This brings us to another crucial concept in neural business architecture: synaptic business connections. Just as your brain forms new neural pathways as it learns, organizations with neural architecture form new business synapses, connections between different aspects of the operation that might not be obvious in traditional organizational structures. Let's explore how this works in practice. Consider a healthcare network that implemented neural architecture across their operations. The system began identifying connections between seemingly unrelated aspects of patient care. It discovered that the scheduling of routine maintenance on medical equipment had subtle impacts on patient recovery times. It found that the timing of staff shift changes influenced patient satisfaction in unexpected ways. But here's where it gets really interesting. The system didn't just identify these connections. It began strengthening beneficial connections and weakening detrimental ones, just like your brain strengthens useful neural pathways and prunes unused ones. This leads us to another key principle of neural business architecture: organizational plasticity. Let me share an example that demonstrates this principle. A technology company implemented neural architecture across their development teams in 2024. Initially, they organized They're teams based on traditional functional boundaries, front-end developers, back-end developers, QA teams, and so on. But the neural system began identifying more efficient ways to structure the teams based on actual work patterns and collaboration needs. This brings us to one of the most powerful aspects of neural business architecture, meta-learning. Let me share a remarkable example of meta-learning in action. An educational technology company implemented neural architecture across their learning platform in 2025. The system didn't just track student progress, it learned how different types of students learned most effectively. It began identifying optimal learning pathways for different types of learners, adjusting content presentation and pacing based on individual learning patterns. But here's the fascinating part. The system also learned how to improve its own learning algorithms. It developed the ability to identify which learning patterns were most successful for different types of content and different types of learners. It could adjust its own learning strategies based on what worked best in different situations. As we approach the end of this lecture, let's consider how neural business architecture integrates with the quantum systems we discussed in our previous session. Combination of quantum processing power and neural learning capabilities creates what we might call quantum neural synthesis, a system that can simultaneously process multiple possibilities while learning and adapting from the results. Consider a final example that brings together everything we've discussed. A global logistics company implemented a quantum neural system across their operations in 2025. The quantum components allowed the system to simultaneously process millions of possible routing scenarios, while the neural components learned from the results to continuously improve the decision-making process. The system developed the ability to not just optimize current operations, but to learn and adapt in ways that transformed the entire business model. It began identifying opportunities for new services, predicting market changes before they occurred, and even suggesting innovative pricing strategies based on complex pattern recognition. As we conclude this lecture, I encourage you to think about how these principles might apply to your own organization. How could neural learning capabilities transform your operations? What patterns might emerge if your organization could think and learn like a brain? How might organizational plasticity allow you to adapt more effectively to changing market conditions? In our next lecture, we'll explore quantum revenue engineering, how to apply these principles specifically to revenue generation and business growth. We'll look at practical implementation strategies and explore more case studies of successful transformations. Remember, the neural revolution in business isn't just about better analytics or smarter automation. It's about creating organizations that can think, learn, and evolve in ways that were previously impossible. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next lecture.